Hey there, Noble! How goes it? How is it going? How are you feeling? Did you have a nice Memorial Day? Did you have a restful 4-day weekend? Ah, it was beautiful. I finally mowed my lawn. Pretty sure my neighbors thought I was starting a hayfield. It is Tuesday, May 26th, and it is the last week of your school year. This remote learning experience is coming to an end. It is hard to wrap my head around that. It's crazy. But we all made it through it. We all made it through it, everybody. We did it. You did it. We did it. You did it. Just 4 days. 4 days. That's wild. So what do we got going on? What do we got going on today? Oh, we're talking about Tuesday. You know the joke that was never funny, but I consistently did it every Tuesday for 2 months? Because I randomly said it at the very end of our very first Monday video. So the very first thing I want to talk about today is I must address a catastrophic oversight. Last Thursday video, I was all hyped up about talking about Harry Potter and about Twilight, and I completely forgot to mention the big news for that Thursday. That Thursday, May 21st, was the 40th anniversary of the release of The Empire Strikes Back. If any of you guys checked out that video a while back where I ranked all my Star Wars movies, you know that Mr. Wilbur puts Empire Strikes Back right at the top. It is my absolute favorite Star Wars movie. Do I dare say it's objectively the best? Is there anybody who puts another Star Wars movie above Empire Strikes Back? Serious question. Most people I know consider that their favorite. Speaking of good stuff, I've been asking you guys to send me things that are cool, and just such a thing crossed my desk. Figuratively, it was emailed to me. This comes from Nevaeh Smeaton Cormier. Nevaeh said, Mrs. Moshan made an assignment where we had to recreate a famous piece of art. So here I am recreating the famous girl with the pearl earring painting. That's amazing. Took me a second when I was looking at it to figure out if that was a photograph or another painting. That's amazing. That's super cool. No, it's great. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. Speaking of artwork, I was on a t-shirt design website the other day, just messing around, and I threw this together. So I have no idea what I'm going to do with that. The website's going to charge like 20 bucks if I actually want to print it. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it worth it? Moving on, the following email was sent to me last week, and since I've talked a bunch about my interest in comic books, I felt the need to address it.
Hot take. DC is better than Marvel. It seems that everybody thinks Marvel is better, but that is a straight up lie. DC has much better characters. For instance, the one and only Batman. I mean, they hear Batman and they think the theme song to the old 60s show. But that's before they've seen the Dark Knight trilogy.
I respect your opinion, and I understand it too.
Although I talked about how my very first love when it came to comic books was the X-Men,
If you were to talk to 16, 17-year-old Mr. Wilbur, I would have said the exact same thing. DC was better than Marvel. Even though the majority of comic books I read at the time and read now just happen to be DC comic books, I've always read stuff from all the publishers. I always read Marvel titles.
I read a ton of Image in the 90s, Wildcats, The Max, Spawn.
But as a man in my 30s, here is my hot take on which company has the best characters. The characters don't matter. Any character is amazing when it's being written by an amazing writer. It's all about the creative people behind the characters. I've read Batman for years. I love Batman. But as writers have come and go over the years, there have been times when Batman's not particularly good. And then there have been times when it's amazing. In fact, you kind of said something in your email that illustrates this point. You mentioned the silly, campy 1960s television show. You also mentioned the dark and gritty, universally beloved Dark Knight trilogy. Both of those are Batman. It's just two wildly different approaches to the same character.
In fact, almost to prove this point, there's a particular writer over at DC who prides himself on character rehabilitation.
Jeff Johns likes to take characters that people think are awful and make them into everybody's favorite just by writing them.
In the 90s, everybody hated Green Lantern. Jeff Johns takes over the title and it becomes one of the best-selling titles of the early 2000s. He's the reason The Flash is so popular right now and they have a TV show. And everybody hated Aquaman. He takes over Aquaman and sales go through the roof.
But what about Marvel vs. DC?
Well, if you go back to the 1960s and 70s, for the most part, people stayed exclusively working for a single company. There were the writers and artists at DC and the writers and artists at Marvel.
So you could have argued that one was better than the other. But for my entire life, that hasn't really been the case. People will write for multiple companies, often at the same time. Brian Michael Bendis for years was known as a Marvel guy.
He wrote giant crossovers like Age of Ultron, House of M.
And he created the character of Miles Morales. But you know what comic he's currently writing? Superman, over at DC. One of my favorite writers, Jeff Lemire, wrote an incredible run on Green Arrow. One of the best comic book runs I've ever read. And as soon as he wrapped up his run on Green Arrow, he went over to Marvel and wrote, you guessed it, Hawkeye. I never read that Hawkeye run, but I heard it was incredible, and I believe it. As I said, the majority of comics I happen to read are DC. But if someone tells me,
hey, have you read The Immortal Hulk? It's incredible.
I'm gonna read it. There's nothing to gain from being like,
ugh, I don't read Marvel, I only read DC.
Or the opposite, if someone's like,
have you read Blackest Night? Ugh, I only read Marvel.
You don't get anything out of that. Now I've just been talking about comic books. I'm sure you're like, what about the movies? The movies are actually a perfect example of what I was talking about when it comes to the creative people behind characters, making them good. Because I'm old enough to remember what the world looked like before the MCU.
Marvel, who was bankrupt at the time, had sold the movie rights to all of their most popular titles. That's why Fox released those X-Men movies. Sony released those Spider-Man movies.
Some were good, but then you ended up with things like the Fox Fantastic Four, or the Ghost Rider movies. Remember those?
But then when Marvel made enough money selling those rights to create their own in-house movie studio, Marvel Studios,
they looked at what they had left. And back then, nobody, and I mean nobody, cared about Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, and Black Widow. They were bottom tier. That's why they weren't sold. But what happened? The right combination of writers, actors, producers, and filmmakers all came together to make those Marvel movies what they are. And now those characters are everybody's favorite characters. And I absolutely love the MCU movies. Now I just talked for a long time about comics and comic book movies, and I did not mention the DC movies. That is a complicated subject.
To date, the modern DC film universe has released 8 movies, and I love 4 of them.
And this week there's huge news that Warner Brothers has decided to release the Snyder Cut. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but if you are interested in hearing my take on the DC movies and would like me to explain what the Snyder Cut is, let me know and I'll talk about it this week. But in the meantime, I believe it's time for our Word of the Day. Brought to you by Mr. Parr, and I believe this is our last address given to us by His Royal Highness King Buford.
Hello there, it's King Buford here again, and I'm here to give you the word of the day. Remember, these words relate to royalty because I am a king. Today's word is blue-blooded. Blue-blooded is an adjective that means someone has family ties to royalty. Sometimes they're called a blue blood. So, if you are related to me by chance, you would be blue-blooded. I hope you've enjoyed today's word of the day. Mwah.
Why, thank you, Your Majesty. And now it's time for This Day in History, brought to you by Mrs. Perkins. Ooh, this is a cool one. In 1897, Bram Stoker's famous novel, Dracula, was published for the first time in the United Kingdom. It wasn't published in the US for another 2 years. I actually love the original Bram Stoker's Dracula. I vividly remember getting it from the Noble Middle School library when I was in 7th grade. That was the first time I read it. And now it's time for our pet of the day. Today's staff pet of the day goes to Mrs. Dixon. My kids love watching your daily announcements with me. They keep bugging me to share this video of our dog, Otis, because it combines your request for skateboarding videos and pet videos. Ooh, I am intrigued. Yes, that's all I want. Dogs on skateboards. Is that so much to ask? Thank you for sharing that. And our student pet of the day goes to Emma Cole. If you could include my two babies for the pet of the day for Monday's video, that would be awesome. Spike is the bearded dragon and Angel is the cat. They get along very well. They love to cuddle. I totally believe you that they love to cuddle. But in this particular picture, I'm just saying, Angel looks terrified. Thank you so much, Emma. So that about does it for today. So at this point, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, everybody, have a fantastic last week. And remember, stay noble knights.